New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here, and I am so glad that you have joined me for today's episode of Inclusive Church. I had to think for a minute, wait, where am I? What am I doing? We're talking about inclusive church. What does it mean to be a church or a spiritual community where you are committed to being inclusive? What are some of the benefits of that? What are some of the easy and fun benefits, and what are some of the challenges, some of the things that make it difficult to be actively engaged in a spiritual community that is working toward and being committed to being inclusive. Two caveats I always start with. One, I use church specifically, not because it's old-timey, not because I'm using it to reclaim it, that church is the gathering of the people. It is not a piece of property. It is not the style of service you have. Church is a gathering of people who have come together in order to not just talk about, but support each other in integrating spiritual principles and beliefs into everyday life. And the other thing I always try to remind myself of is that when I'm using the word leaders or leader, that to be a leader in a spiritual community or in a church, you do not have to be a minister. We do hope that every minister is an effective, productive, inspiring leader. But we know that leaders come in all shapes and sizes, and leaders carry so many different roles in a successful church in general, and in an inclusive church especially. So, this is all part of the Stained Glass Spirit brand, or the Stained Glass Spirit work that I do with spiritual communities, based on, or not based on, but inspired by the book Stained Glass Spirit, becoming a spiritual community where oneness does not require sameness. And this week, I am not speaking with a guest or two, and instead it is a Toolkit Tuesday. And on Toolkit Tuesdays, I try to keep the episode to 30-ish minutes or less, and try to focus in on a specific tool, tip, technique, trend that will help you in your commitment to being inclusive. So today I decided that I would share the 5A model. And the 5A model was developed specifically to help anyone who was receiving feedback, especially if there was a cultural element to the feedback, and to be able to do that without getting defensive, or maybe you feel defensive But the 5A method will help you respond from a centered, grounded place instead of reacting from your defensiveness. And it's really interesting to me that, especially when someone is giving us feedback, and especially if it's related to some cultural aspect or some cultural mismatch or some cultural clash, that we get even more defensive. And I think a big part of that is the description I have at the top of the model. We get really defensive because no one wants to be labeled as insensitive to the needs of another group or the desires or the norms of another group. And so if someone is giving us feedback, even if they don't use the words racist or sexist or homophobic, they may not use the words, but just the fact that they may be giving us some feedback, then that, maybe it's because, maybe you're not understanding. I know I have given people feedback a few times about touching a Black woman's hair or head, and I never use the word racist. I usually, not always, but usually, if I'm giving that type of feedback or coaching, it comes out something very similar to, oh, you may not be aware that touching a Black woman's hair or head could be considered quite offensive. But the person receiving the feedback or the coaching hears Tracy's calling me a racist, and I'm not. And so now I got to prove to Tracy that I'm not. Let me explain to her all the reasons why I'm not a racist. And so we do that. And whether it's, about Black and white race, right, or I've been on the other end of getting input or getting feedback about racial or ethnic groups different from my own, and things that I didn't know. And I wouldn't know unless somebody is telling me. So we want to be very grateful for the feedback. And it's not just about race and ethnicity, right? It's about any of the ways that we are significantly different, or our identities are really different, right? It could be based on race or age or religion. It could be based on language spoken. It could be based on education. It can even be based on like profession or title, because there have been many times in churches that I've been either involved in or working with, many times that, just the culture of how certain spiritual practices are taught or are practiced, or the roles between minister and laity, and there's considered the right way to do it. And any type of identity that's really you don't know, and someone is gifting you with information to help you be more effective, it can feel really uncomfortable. So the 5A model is designed to help you get through those kinds of situations. So let's jump into it. Why is it called the 5A model? Well, really, it is called the 5A model because all 5 of the steps start with the letter A. And in my mind, when I was developing this a long time ago, I was trying to come up with something that I could actually remember, like in the heat of a conversation or in the pressure of a conversation, because often it's not heated, except in our own minds, that we think someone is criticizing us, and I have to defend myself, and I get heated up internally, and they were just giving me information. Occasionally, the feedback or the criticism does come at you with some heat because someone has been really hurt or offended, or everything's happening really fast, and maybe they didn't know how to give you feedback or criticism in a more calm way because what you did or said really pissed them off. And so sometimes it will come at you full force. But my observation over the last couple of decades is that most of the time people stop and think, and when they're really mad, they hold back because they don't want to yell and scream, but they want to give you the information so you don't make that mistake again with them or with anyone else. So it's called the 5A model because it helps me remember there are 5 steps and they all start with the letter A. And here we go. So again, responding to cross-cultural criticism effectively is the goal, but that would be a really long name for a model. So the first A is to accept the criticism. Accept the criticism or the feedback that you are being given. This is really important. Some people have asked me over the years, why isn't the first A apologize? So the first A is definitely not apologize, because that is also me focused. I want you to know that I'm sorry. I want you to know that I didn't mean to, right? But the intention has nothing to do with it. So the first place to begin is accept that what this person is telling you is true from their perspective. Now, depending on what they're telling you, it may be appropriate to apologize, but I don't want you to think first, I've got to apologize. You don't start there. You start with accepting that what they're telling you is true based on their experience or what they know, what they have learned, or what their culture or group practices. And I just have to accept that's true. I can't argue with you about your experience. If someone tells me that I should be doing or not doing a certain thing in order to be effective in my communication with them, in my relationship building with them, in my ability to work with or provide service to them, my first step is simply to accept the feedback. And one thing that I might want to do to make sure they realize I am accepting their feedback is I might want to rephrase it or paraphrase it so it is clear to them that I got it, that I understood exactly what they were saying. And then the second A is I want to acquire more information. So I want to accept it as true, and then I want to acquire more information, because unless I was intending to offend them or intending to do something wrong, clearly I don't know what I don't know. So what specific behavior or actions that I took, what did I say or what did I do that was the seed for the complaint or the criticism or the feedback? So it's one thing for me to accept that I did something that was inappropriate, which is different than wrong. I did something inappropriate, or I said something that was inappropriate, but I need to understand the why. because otherwise I'll go do the same thing with someone else or even with this person if I'm not understanding the nuance underneath it. So I want to accept that what they're saying is applicable. And two, then I want to acquire more information. Now, here's a key with this. When I am acquiring information, I want to acquire information that translates into behavior. Why is this important? Beliefs and attitudes are invisible. Now, right, when we're interacting with people, we do make up or reinterpret their behavior and link it to what they might be thinking or what they might believe. But in this case, when someone has given you some feedback, then if they're giving you feedback that is evaluative, right? Well, you're just a racist. That's not helpful. I need to know what I actually said or did that made them come to that conclusion. So it's important to really try to get underneath the label or what might be, you have a bad attitude. Okay, tell me what I said that made you think that, because I don't actually I don't actually want that to be how I come across. So tell me, what I did that in my nonverbal or behavior or in what I said. And it's really interesting. I'm thinking of an example that literally just happened during the last month with me, where someone labeled me or said, I thought from their perspective, I was coming from a certain place that was opposite of where they were coming from. That was their perspective. That was their perception. And luckily, and there's a cultural piece. This is an international. There were people from different countries in the room and or in the conversation in the Zoom room. And this person was dual citizenship, so understands the US very well, but also lives in a different country and has for decades. And so I thought, let me ask specifically what I said or did that gave that perception or that fueled that perception. And when they told me, I was like, oh, now I completely understand why you have that perception. And it shifted the whole conversation, because internally I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to prove to this person all the ways I was not what they were saying. And that would not have been productive in that moment. So it was really great for me to be able to kind of slow down myself, my reaction, but also get more information. And so this, if you can understand it, then right, the first and second A will help you a lot. And so there are three more A's, but I do want to stop for a minute and say hey to Marjorie and to Lenora and to Anita. And yeah, Lenora, the piece about attitude and behavior, we mix them up. And when we are being inclusive in our spiritual communities, it's important that we understand how we perceive someone's attitude it may really be that we are uncomfortable with, disappointed by, or totally unaccepting of their behavior. But the attitude may or may not match how we describe it. But in this case, we're focused on, like, what do we do when someone does show up? And yes, they've labeled us. That's what we all do. We label other people because we are trying to engage in relationship with them, or we are trying to get service from them, or we are providing a service or product to them, and our relationships matter. The more diversity you have in your church, the more often you will be misunderstood, because it's not always just personality. It's cultural, based on gender or race or language or age. There are so many different ways that our cultural background can get in the way of conversation. So, first A, it's a test. Okay, first A, accept. Second A, I'm pretending that I can hear you. Acquire. So what's the third A? The third A is that once we've acquired more information, then we have the opportunity to ask for expectations. What's expected? That what behavior would be better? What behavior would help me be more effective in a similar conversation? What behavior, or what things would I say or do differently to replace the stereotype that I might have been operating from in my head, right? Translating comments about attitudes or beliefs into behaviors which represent the desired standard is critical. And we're not real skilled at it. Most of us are not, unless we've been doing this kind of work, or unless we've done a lot of work in therapy or in some kind of situation that requires us to translate feelings into words. And in general, many adults are not really skilled at this, because most of us have been trained from a very young age not to express our feelings, to hold them in, or to not let other people know what they are. But it comes out in our behavior, and then we're not able to describe, oh, well, if you did this instead. Easy example, probably an overused example, but it's an easy one to tap into to give you ideas. So if someone is coming up to me and I just either cut my hair, or maybe I have extensions with my hair, and they mean it as a compliment, right? But they come up and grab it, or they come up and say, oh, is it real? Or, oh, that's so cute. And that's not advisable behavior for anyone who it's not respectful behavior for any adult woman. But there are cultural overlays with Black women as a result of the history of slavery, the history of colonialism, the history of making the ways that Black women wearing natural hair versus chemically processed hair has been weaponized in society over many decades. So there are a lot of overlays that go beyond simply being disrespectful of me as an adult instead of a child. And so I've, lots of ways that if, someone says, oh, I wasn't aware. I give them the information. You might not ever want to do that again because it can be interpreted as very offensive by many Black women. And then they acquire information, right? So maybe they ask me, tell me more. And I might not go into the whole 15-minute lecture, but I might say what I just said. Well, not only is it disrespectful for any adult, but it has connotations that go all the way back to colonialism or slavery or Black women's hair being considered a negative and used as a weapon in the workplace. So let's say I give them that information and maybe they ask me a question and I answer that. So the next step is would be for them to ask me for what would be better. And on the one hand, it's simple. Just don't do that anymore. But I probably would say if you are admiring a Black woman's hair, simply give her a compliment. Don't make it about you wanting to touch it. That's really about you and your enjoyment and your comfort. Simply give her a compliment. I really love your hair. Or, I am really interested in your hair. Can you tell me more about that style? Another asking for expectations, if I were giving them another option, would be that you could ask for permission to touch her hair or her head and allow the answer no to be no. Because often, if asked, Black women will allow people to touch their hair once they know why, or if there's a relationship there that is like, oh, yeah, sure. But you won't know unless you ask. So I would give them 2 or 3 examples of what would be more acceptable behavior. So if I'm on the receiving end of the feedback, that's why I know it's really important to ask, okay, I don't want to make that mistake again. What would be better if I'm trying to build a relationship or if I'm trying to resolve an issue? And the focus is not correcting what just happened. The focus is on the future. What would be appropriate for my future behavior? So we're going to accept the feedback. We're going to acquire more information, ask for expectations, and then number 4 and 5 are somewhat related, but they're in this order on purpose for a reason. Number 4, commit to action. So if you can change the situation, do so. If you can influence change, do so, but be very clear verbally about what you will do, what action this person can expect from you. They've given you feedback. They've come to you with some information, trying to be helpful to you. And now it's your turn to be very clear about what action you will take. Now, sometimes as leaders in our spiritual communities, we are not the one who makes the decision if it's something not just personal, but someone's giving you feedback about how they felt at an event or that something happened at the church that really bothered them. So you can't guarantee, but what you can guarantee is that I will take this to the board. I will schedule a meeting with this team leader and we'll talk about it and I'll get back to you within 24 days, right? I can be very specific about what I will do. And then, of course, I'm going to only promise something that I know I can actually do. And then number 5 is express appreciation for the feedback. Now, this is not always easy because often what happens is someone does give us feedback and it's something that we want to defend ourselves against, or they share information and we feel we've been wrongly judged. But no matter what, we always want the 5th step to be to show appreciation, to express appreciation for the feedback. I find myself often saying, wow, I bet it was a little difficult for you to give me this information, but I'm so grateful that you took the time to do that. Or if I'm feeling really kind of heated and I'm really working hard not to be defensive, I may even say that, this is really hard for me to hear, but I wouldn't know if you didn't tell me, and I'm so grateful that you did. There are other ways that you can easily get into the gratitude piece, right? I'm grateful you care enough about our relationship that you are sharing this information with me. I am so grateful that you were willing to speak up because I have done that with other people and they never said a word. And I'm thankful that you are now breaking me of this habit, right? You're grateful for them bringing it up to you. And then, of course, there is no 6th step formally, but you do want to make sure that you follow up and let that person know that you took the action that you promised to take. And here's what happened as a result of that. Or here's how I'm feeling now that I'm practicing something new. That will close the loop. So that's today's toolkit tune-up. Just something for you to have, or your Tuesday toolkit item, just something for you to have in mind, for you to think about, and for you to use the 5A model, being able to accept the information, acquire more detail about why that creates a problem, take the time to ask questions or ask for expectations, ask for what would be better behavior in the future, then take action or commit to a specific action, and then finally show appreciation or express appreciation. Is there a difference between feedback, criticism, or advice from others not necessarily associated with leadership and followership dynamics? I think each one of us may have some slightly different definitions, which is why I use the multiple terms so that whichever one relates more to you fits. But I also use multiple terms here because depending on the scenario, it really does happen that sometimes people will say, I'm just giving you feedback about what you said in the meeting and how it came across, right? And it may not be a criticism. It really may be just feedback. Are you aware that when you shared that slide about X, Y, and Z, that you couldn't see the people on the right side of the room, and there were people with curious, like they had questions about it, but they didn't ask. And so you might want to follow up with that at our team meeting next week. That's feedback, right? Criticism, it really is, you did this and it was ineffective, or you did this and it hurt my feelings. You did this and it is a criticism of something that, actually harmed the relationship or harmed me personally or harmed the group, right? And advice is different, usually in the context that it is coaching right? And so if someone comes to me and they are actually coaching and they're like, wow, Tracy, you may not know, in the LGBTQ plus community, these 3 words could trigger a negative response, or will trigger people tuning you out. And they're giving me advice about not using those words. But if I'm defensive about it, like, oh, I should have known, or oh, well, I've never heard that before, so it must not be true, right? It's another place where this 5-step model can be really helpful, because they're telling me, they're offering some coaching, and I want to accept that without being defensive. So they're slightly different, and we often hear from people who are invested in each one of us being a more effective leader, and it can show up as feedback or criticism or advice. So that's our Tuesday toolkit from the Inclusive Church Show for today. I really hope that at least 1 or 2 of those steps will stick in your mind. Remembering that they all start with an A is usually helpful for me. Even if I kind of miss 1 or 2, it gets me right into the mindset. And especially if you're not going to remember all of them, remember accept at the beginning and show appreciation at the end. Because in the middle, you're likely to ask questions to get more information anyway. And if you've been a leader for a while, you are thinking already about, well, what action do I need to take? But how you start and how you end can make all the difference in the world for people believing that you do care about them and that you are as committed as you say you are to being inclusive. My name is Tracy Brown. You can follow me at Stained Glass Spirit on Facebook, or the website stainedglassspirit.net. And I'll see you again right here on the New Thought Media Network next Tuesday at noon Mountain Time.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.